On behalf of Boulder Community Health, it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, John Schutz. Dr. Schutz is board certified in nuclear cardiology, cardiovascular medicine, and internal medicine. After receiving his bachelor's degree in biology from the Colorado College in Colorado Springs, he earned his MD at the University of Missouri Medical School. Dr. Schutz completed his residency in internal medicine at Loyola University Medical School, and after that, he pursued a fellowship in cardiology at the University of Missouri Medical Center in Columbia, Missouri. He is a fellow of the American College of Cardiology. Dr. Schutz sees patients at Boulder Heart at Community Medical Center in Lafayette and Erie Medical Center in Erie. Welcome, Dr. Schutz.
Good evening, viewers. We did this talk, a version of this talk, I think about a year and a half ago. And so this is a little bit of an update. I have a tremendous amount of slides and I can't wait to show you all of them. I'm kidding. We're going to work through some things here. Some of the slides have information that we're going to make accessible through online access. In a little bit, we'll talk about that. I'm just going to get started with some of these wonderful slides that I've warned you about. Again, this is an update on the Essential 8. Okay, so cardiovascular disease is very common. I mean, can you see my dull face as I say this? It's why I went in medicine. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men, women, and people of most ethnic and racial groups in the United States. Every 33 seconds, someone dies of cardiovascular disease in the United States. Every 40 seconds, someone has a heart attack. And so in 2022, when the data was most available at that time, you know, because it takes a little bit of time for us to crunch the numbers, over 700,000 people died from heart disease in the United States. I like maps. I love maps. You're going to have a lot of maps with this talk. These maps show us where these events occur. This map in particular is the age standardized rate per 100,000 where there's been heart disease death. So I usually emphasize these maps because there tends to be a trend, and you will see a trend as we go through with other maps with other issues. But I want to point out that, you know, there tends to be a heavier burden in the Mississippi and Ohio River Basin. United States, the prevalence of ideal cardiovascular health. This is what we're going for today, is exceptionally low. This is a problem for all age groups. Cardiovascular health declines with age, and the prevalence of ideal cardiovascular health for those greater than 60 years of age is only 4%. If we go down in age a little bit to 40 to 59, it's 11%. These numbers are not great. The lower the socioeconomic status, the worsening of the cardiovascular health that is seen. There's a significant difference in cardiovascular health in self-reported race and ethnicity as well. And there's a high difference in cardiovascular health geographically. Again, we can refer back to the map that we just looked at. Ideal cardiovascular health is very poor in pregnancy across the board. So we've started to kind of build this argument. The prevalence, it costs a lot. I showed this slide last time we did this. It's got a lot of numbers. The short and sweet of this is it costs a lot of money for us to deal with cardiovascular health now, and it's only going to go up. The thing that I usually use as a take home is for every $6 spent on healthcare, $1 of it goes to cardiovascular disease. The bad news is that over the next 10 years, it's expected to increase to $2 billion per day. So it's $1 billion per day at present for cardiovascular disease, and it's projected to go up by 2030 to $2 billion per day. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is how we introduced the Essential 8. It was previously Simple 7 before. I'm going to go back in time a little bit to 1993. There was an article in Preventive Medicine by Breslow and Breslow. They formulated 7 habits that need to be identified. Now, 1993 to 2010, a few years passed before we were able to get this graphic together. trying to pinpoint 7 different things that we can highlight. And these were monitoring glucose, cholesterol, blood pressure, eating healthy, exercising, quit smoking, and weight. Well, as time passed, we realized that there probably was another metric we should add in there. And I spoke of this the last time, which is the addition of sleep. So this is the 2022 upgrade with 2 major components being health behaviors and health factors. In the behaviors, again, activity, quit smoking, eat well, and sleep well. With factors, we're looking at managing weight, controlling cholesterol, controlling glucose, and blood pressure. So we went from the simple 7 to the essential 8. So we're going to work through these topics. And the one thing, this is where I think I want to have a homework assignment started as you're out there listening to what we have to talk about today. We're going to work through each of these 8 topics relatively quickly. I'm going to hit some high points. At the conclusion of each of these, after the map, there's a little a 1-page picture. And if we go to heart.org, which is what I'm going to put this in the chat box so you guys can see, but go to heart.org. I encourage you to go there. The issue with these talks is that I can show you these slides. There's a bunch of information. We'll hit highlights. If you go to the website, you can actually click on different parts of the same slide, and it's a link. So it'll tell you a little bit more in-depth information about each of the topics we're going to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is tobacco. You've got to quit smoking. Tobacco is modifiable, and the newest update encompasses both traditional cigarettes as well as e-cigarettes, vaping. It's the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. We should just stop right there. 1/3 of all cardiovascular deaths have some link back to tobacco use. And the thing that's really spooky for me is 40% of the US children aged 3 to 11 are exposed to secondhand smoke. 40% of children in the United States are exposed to secondhand smoke. This is tragic. I love these pictures because it just shows us how much history has changed. This is like 1950s. We've got, Joe Doctor here enjoying a nice cigarette with all the things in the background. Of course, everyone in the background smoking as well, which is just disheartening. But fast forward to 1993, and we've got this guy with his wonderful doctor coat, and of course he's got a cigarette in his hand. So these changes that we're trying to make with tobacco, it's not that long ago when everyone was smoking. And we're trying so hard to get people to quit. And there are lots of people out there that still smoke. Let's look at another map. So this map is a rendering of where people smoke the most in the United States. Again, and I don't really want you to be able to see, a state or anything like that, but if you squint at this, sometimes you can pick up where the darker trend is. And again, it's in the deep south. It's where a lot of tobacco is grown, unfortunately. There are also highlights up in Montana and South Dakota, down in Arizona, New Mexico, which are tied to Indian reservations. So this is the graphic I was talking about. I'm looking at it here. My vision has gotten worse as I've gotten older. I can see you perfectly fine. This is small. I think the key parts out of this are education. We want you to understand the benefits of quitting smoking. There is no age where quitting smoking does no good for you. At any age you quit, you get benefit out of it. And one of the biggest things to come out of quitting is to come up with a plan. If you're doing this in isolation by yourself, it's difficult. If you decide to quit and your partner does not, it's very difficult to quit. So I think if you have a team approach where other people are with you on this, you're there for them, they're there for you. You've got to set a date. You've got to choose when you're going to do it. Prepare yourself. Get all the things that you do that make it so it's easy for you to smoke. Ashtrays, lighters, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. And you'll find that after 1 year, the risk is reduced by half. There's strength in numbers. I'm a big fan, and I can say this, I'm from Missouri. I can say this more in Colorado, especially in Boulder, Lafayette, Louisville, Erie. Yoga's great. So it's the deep breathing of tobacco use that is also part of the addiction. Sure, there's lots of chemicals that have been put in the cigarettes, but the deep breathing is one of the things that you benefit from when you quit smoking. And so I'm encouraging people to do more yoga, do it at home, go to a class, get some friends together, go do it outside. We'll come back to that. Here's the next topic, eating better. All right, this is also modifiable. We're trying to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables. Again, this sounds like a commercial from like 1971. We don't want you to drink Coke and Pepsi. Alcohol is moving up on my list of things to avoid. I used to say a glass of wine is fine. To be honest with you, I think that any alcohol is probably bad for, and I'm sure that I'm losing 50% of the audience right now. But I think that alcohol is not a good thing for us to be putting into our system. Processed foods, also not great. Plant-based diet is great. It's wonderful. I personally don't do it. I like to have, a steak once in a while. And I think that one of the things that I come up with as I come down this list of things is a lot of it is everything in moderation. Now, I disagree with what we've been told about alcohol. I do not think alcohol in moderation makes sense. I think, if you don't drink, don't start. If you have an occasional glass of wine with dinner, and I mean a traditional glass of wine, I'm not saying the glass of wine, it's probably okay. I think people need to watch their calories. I'm not into the counting of the calories. I just think people have to be aware of what they're putting into themselves as far as food goes. And then eat at home. If you're not a good cook, find the things that you like to do. And I also am a big fan of people sitting down at the table and having a conversation. Lose the phone, right? These are just pictures. This is like Mediterranean diet with your fish, your nuts. Avocados are wonderful. And these pictures are kind of pretty. I like these pictures. Broccoli, almonds, kiwis, tomatoes, oranges, blueberries, all wonderful things. And they taste good, right? So let's go get them. Here's another map. This one, so now you're starting to see where I'm going, since we all live in Colorado. Sorry, Missouri and Virginia, if you're watching. But the healthy states, of course, Colorado's #1. We're doing really well with eating healthy. Again, the Deep South, Mississippi River, Ohio River, Missouri River, this area is not doing so well with eating. And a lot of it has to do with excess, which I think is another topic that will come up as we move through this. So it's easy for us to eat well when you have access to it. One of the problems is that making good food accessible and affordable is not really what we're doing so well in this country right now. This is the graphic from heart.org. Again, if you go to heart.org, each of these is laid out, all 8 of these. We can see this pretty well, but if anyone has any trouble seeing it, I want you to know right where it came from. We're trying to get people to come up with patterns, a healthy eating pattern. We want, again, watch the calories. You don't have to count them. Just know what you're eating. Enjoy the fresh fruits, the vegetables, the fish. We're wanting to limit things like alcohol, I would say, in particular, because that's just a hot topic. And avoid the processed foods. Just avoid them. The DASH and Mediterranean diets they're out there. They're easy to follow. A lot of people are asking about, dietary options. I think a lot of it is individual. I think you got to eat what you like. Now, people are like, well, I like eating steak. And I'm like, I get it. But it's like, I think we have to modify some of this a little bit so that you're getting some good things out of what you're doing, when you have steak as well. I don't want people eating steak every night. Move more. This one, I took this picture. This is up by Chautauqua. This is why we live here. We want people to get outside. We want people to go walk. The weather right now is actually really nice. It's not as cold, or it's going to get cold. It's not as hot as it was, and it's nice and chilly in the morning. Feels good. Walk more. Do weight training. We want time and distance. So if you don't exercise and you walk for 5 minutes and you're tired, I'll take it. But what I would ask is do that for a week, do that for 2 weeks, and then see if you can extend it out to 10 minutes. One of the things I've told a lot of patients is when you get out to go for a walk in the morning, pick up a stone, and set a timer on your watch, walk 10 minutes and set the stone down and walk home. And then the next day, you could set your watch for 10 minutes and get to the stone and do 2 more steps, 3 more steps, set that thing down and go back home. So each and every day, a little bit further, maybe a little bit faster, but it's habit forming. We want people to be doing something where I love it when people come in and they're like, I don't feel good when I don't exercise. I think that when you get to that level, things are good. The other thing, we referenced this with smoking as well, partner up. Find someone else to go with you. There will be a day when you don't want to go and they do. Or if you have a group of people. I think the more the merrier, but I think that the more we get outside, especially with where we live, the better. Here's another graphic, another map saying how wonderful Colorado is as far as regular and routine exercise. I'm really pushing the Colorado thing here. And again, these are small. You'll be able to see all these slides afterward. This is the graphic from heart.org. We're trying to get 150 minutes of exercise a week. We're trying to get 75 minutes of vigorous exercise a week. And I think that the biggest thing is to set a goal and stick with it. We need people to be getting a routine started with respect to your health. I don't want people sitting. A lot of people sit on their computers. I'm like, if that's your job, part of me is like, get a stand-up desk. And they're like, oh, I can't afford a stand-up desk. I'm like, you can put your desk up on blocks. Get the books you're not reading anymore, put them down there and get standing up. But I think the more you're moving as much as you can with the jobs you have, the better. I consider that exercise. I think going out for a walk at lunchtime is exercise. If you like the gym, go to the gym. But I think we've just got to get people going with a routine because I think that helps in the long term. This one's a big issue, managing weight. This is also modifiable. And some of these things we've already discussed with trying to get you to eat better. So one of the benefits of eating better is that you'll have some improvement in your weight. If you're eating, things like ice cream, you have a scoop of ice cream every night. If it's every night, then part of me is like, cut it down to 3 nights a week. I think that for me, with the patients I see, when you tell someone to stop something completely, it's a challenge. But if you tell them to make small changes to the routines that they've had for years, where it doesn't hurt as much, it's not as big a deal, I think that you'll have more traction with long-term benefit. So we're wanting you to kind of see what kind of calories you put in. With a lot of the wearable technology we have today, you can track the calories that are going out. BMI, I'll come back to this in a second. This is a little bit dated. We still look at BMI. I don't think we're using it as much. The problem is that it breaks down with certain ethnicities and demographics. So it's not the best thing for us to be using. I'll give you a couple different alternatives to BMI. I think one of the reasons we still use it is because it's easy. And with so many things, when it's easy and people know it and have heard of it, it's like we can calculate this, but I'm putting a little bit less weight on the BMI. These are 3 terrible food choices that you can make. This is Jimmy John's JJ Gargantuan with 2,100 calories. It has 5 different kinds of meat. They are all processed. This is a Cheesecake Factory breakfast burrito with 2,700 calories. This is equivalent to 7 McDonald's McMuffins. And then the last one, if you sit and you eat this in one setting, we seriously have to talk. This is 3,500 calories. This is the 5-meat feast from Little Caesars. There's 438 calories per slice of pizza. Again, these are easy things to get out. I had fun looking these up. I was trying to find the worst burgers, and this blew it away. Here's our map again. Well, look at it. There's Colorado. It's green because we are not having a problem with weight here because we go outside and we exercise and we eat well. This is how to manage your weight. We've talked about this. See if you can track the calories in, the calories out, learn your BMI, okay. I'll show you the calculator for the BMI. The thing about a lot of the calculations we can do now is there's an app for that. I feel like all of the stuff we've talked about so far, I could be like, well, there's an app for that. And it's a little hypocritical because I think the more we go into this, the more I'm going to be like, set your phone down, go for a walk, talk to someone like in person, go have coffee with someone, get off the phone, texting, FaceTime, I think that the other thing that I've tried to do, and it's easier said than done, is to try and get dietitians in our offices. Because I think for cardiology, I think we do okay, when we're like, don't eat the cheeseburger, lay off the bacon, maybe don't have a milkshake every night. But I think that there are people that have been hyper educated in dietary ideas and plans, and I think we should implement them a whole lot more. We have cards in the office to try and get people in to see a dietitian. There are things you do that you think are good that are not. There are things you do that you think are bad that might not be that bad. And I think that if we can have you, talking with a person, again, I'm going back to that rather than doom scrolling on Google or going to all these apps that I'm doing the wishy-washy here, but I think to be able to sit down with a person who knows what they know, who's been educated in dietary discretion, I'll call it, I think would be massively beneficial for everyone. This is the BMI calculation. Again, I think that this oversimplifies people. I think that in the beginning, this is like so many things in medicine. I feel like this is based on like white men. I'll be honest with you. I think that we got the data that we got from this. I think there are much better ways for us to assess where you are with respect to your weight. One of them is a relative fat mass. Another is body adipose index. Again, here I'm standing over here. I'm saying over here. I'm like, don't get on your phone. These things these are apps that you can use. I think that these other means for assessing body mass are going to gain a whole lot more traction, because I think that the diversity of our country is not just what the BMI has been spitting out for the last several years. So I think that BMI, it might have a place, but I think it's to be used supplementally with other information. And I think that it's too basic, and it's not a good representation. This is our next topic, control cholesterol. I'm a huge fan of controlling cholesterol. This is a modifiable metric. And what I mean by that is, a lot of what we try and do is we find out what you do as far as your lifestyle that may contribute to elevated cholesterol. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people I see, they eat pretty darn well. And so ultimately we get to the point where we're down to genetics. Like what you inherited from your parents as far as total cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL, and LDL. And I might get some pushback on this, but I feel that these four numbers are a whole lot easier for us to initially work with. And I'm stressing the way that I've worded that. There are many other labs that we can look at, such as ApoA, ApoA, LP(a), ApoB, my apologies. And I think that there's a place for those. I will come back to that in a second. But I feel that we can do a lot with just these four numbers. And I think that modifying or finding out what you do as far as how you eat and exercise can do a lot with determining the next steps with cholesterol. So I think the other thing I'm wanting to do is I'm not wanting to make it sound like, your cholesterol is high, here's a statin. Because the guidelines actually don't say that. The guidelines emphasize all the things we've talked about so far, which would be lifestyle modification, regular exercise, eating well, quit smoking. I like this guy. This is Dr. Endo. He worked with fungal extralytes back in 1959 when the first statin hit the market. And I just think, credit where credit's due. It's because of this guy, it's kind of launched us in the direction of cholesterol management that's changed. I think the addition of statins, and everyone's going to want to talk about, the side effects of statins, and I hear you. I think that each individual, when they get put on a cholesterol medicine, our job also is to talk with you about potential side effects. I'll be honest with you, most people don't have side effects, but that's fine. We'll just set that aside, and then we'll talk about muscle aches, muscle pains. We'll talk about brain fog. These are the big ones that kind of come up when people come in. And I think that, I hope that more patients feel that we're learning to listen to what they say, because if you didn't have a symptom before you started a medicine and now you do, it's quite possible that the medicine you just started is causing the problem. Come on, right? Here's another map. again, I think at this point in time, I mean, how many maps have I shown you guys? 5? You're starting to see where there's a problem with cholesterol and weight and tobacco and lack of exercise. And I don't think it's a problem on the part of the people. I think it might be a part of the problem is society. So our society, the way we believe in Colorado is get outside, exercise, eat well. That's what we do. I don't think that is emphasized as much in some of these other communities. And I think some of it has to do with just where you're brought up, where you're from. I'm from Missouri. I mean, Missouri not doing so good there. This is how to control your cholesterol. I think the key out of this slide is understand what the cholesterol is, what it means. I also think that this is slightly oversimplified. We're talking about HDL being the good cholesterol. Sure, we can say that. I think the LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol. We could say that. But I think, triglycerides, if exceedingly high, that can also be bad. If your HDL is particularly low, that's not necessarily good. And the only way you can kind of find out what your cholesterol is to come in and see a doctor and get some lab work done. So we can get your cholesterol. Many times we look at your cholesterol and your liver enzymes together. There's a method to the madness. We like to know what these things look like before you potentially get started on a medication. I also like to know what they look like with lifestyle modification, both of them, your cholesterol and your liver enzymes. If you drink a lot, your liver enzymes can be up. But I think eating smart, moving more, no nicotine. So we're starting to see this repeating pattern through all of these different health, these essential 8 topics. And so they feed in on each other. We're trying to get people to do, I wrote a note to myself, replace the saturated fats with unsaturated fats. So this is your avocado in particular. I mean, that's like the go-to. The Lp(a), statins have very little effect. You could do something like electrophoresis. Don't recommend it. There is a new drug in the pipeline that potentially could be used for the Lp(a). ApoB 100 in particular, is modified by statins. But when we get out into these other markers of inflammation, it gets confusing. And I think it gets confusing because a lot of times we don't know for sure if they're the cause or simply the marker. And I think that's why I like to just reduce it down to the fabulous 4, I call them, the total cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL, and LDL. Monitoring glucose, also quite important. This used to be something where I'm like, you have to go get a lab so we can see what your glucose looks like. Not anymore. We've got transcutaneous monitors now. And there's transcutaneous monitors where you don't have to have the diagnosis of diabetes. Glucose from foods eaten with high sugar as well as carbohydrates. Here you go with access of levels or assessment of levels with transcutaneous monitor. We're looking for levels that are under 100 in general. If your fasting glucose is 100 to 125, it's indicative of us needing to watch for diabetes. If it's greater than 126, this is where the risks become the greatest. I threw this in here. My sister loves Peeps. There was a gentleman that ate 255 of these suckers in 5 minutes. That's 3.75 pounds of sugar to the tune of 7,140 calories. That's just disgusting. So don't do that. Sorry to my sister. This is diabetes on a map again. I'd just like to show where the problem is. Not necessarily at this point in time, so I'm gonna shift things a little bit. Colorado, we're doing great. But when you look at the big picture of our country, part of what we need to do is we need to work on these other areas. We need to help people to understand. I mean, these talks, whoever's listening, I mean, my personal, how many people are watching right now is about 16. I'm kidding. But if we get more people watching these topics and going to where the resource material is, it's quite helpful. How to manage your blood sugar. I think a lot of it also has to do with knowing what the numbers mean, knowing how you feel based on what your glucose levels are. And then if you have access to your transcutaneous monitor, I can't tell you how many people I see with diabetes who have that, and they're like, it's a total game changer. It's changed everything about management of diabetes and assessment of glucose. Tracking blood pressure. Okay. This one's tough. I did do a talk on hypertension some time back. This is overly simple, but I just want people to understand, the top number is systolic, the bottom number is diastolic. The perfect goal is less than 120 over less than 80. We're very happy with those numbers. And then we've got stage 1 hypertension, stage 2, and I want people to get a cuff. I also wrote a little note to myself here, and I'm a huge fan of Medical Monday. I think people should get up on Monday, check your blood pressure, check your heart rate, get your oxygen saturation, do a weight. If you have a glucose monitor, what's your glucose? Write it down. Write this stuff down for yourself, but write it down for your doctors. When you come see cardiology, if you've got 50 numbers, 50 days of data compared to the one blood pressure you have in our office because you ran up the stairs, you couldn't find a place to park, someone yelled at you, your blood pressure's up. I think that for you to supplement some of the data that we get with our one blood pressure would be fantastic. Doing your blood pressure monitoring at home, it's not that hard. The problem, if you want to have a problem, is you can get a wrist cuff or an arm cuff. To be honest with you, I think the wrist cuff is prone to error. I think that one of the best ways to use the wrist cuff would be that you're laying flat in bed, so everything's on the same level. I mean, the key is to have the cuff, wherever it may be, at the level of your heart. And people are like, well, I hold my arm up for my blood pressure. And I'm like, yeah, but you've got some muscles firing in there. And so I think if you're going to use a wrist cuff, lay flat in bed. Otherwise, I want the arm cuff, and I want it on skin. And so one of the issues we run into is it's like one size fits all, and it's generally not. I think that if you got a big arm, we need a big cuff. If you got a small arm, we need a smaller cuff. And some of the cuffs that you can get out there accommodate for that. And I think that that's really important. The other thing is, if you don't know what to do, come in and we'll talk. I mean, we can go through this with you as the patient and find out what we need to do. But I think for you to be able to get some information on your own is really beneficial. Yeah, so here's I don't even know what company this is, Omeron, but I think that these cuffs, they're quite simple. This blood pressure is terrible. I put this in here because I was like, this guy needs to go see a doctor. 203 over 114. So here's hypertension prevalence. And this is the data that I pulled from 2018 through 2020. It's tracking with obesity, it's tracking with smoking and diabetes and lack of exercise. And I think it's unfortunate because some of it has to do with education and some of it has to do with access. So here's your one-page synopsis about eating smart, exercising, managing your weight, don't smoke, and sleep well. So they finally snuck that on there. But I think that this is nice because it gives you, what we're really shooting for as far as the perfect blood pressure. The one thing that I will talk about, because I think this is important, if you have had high blood pressure your whole life and you come in to see us at the ripe young age of 75 or 80 and we're going to put you on medicine, I can tell you right now that if we get you on medicine, we're going to feel good about your blood pressure looking at like 117 over 76, but you're probably not going to feel too good. And so this is one of the things where we have to work with you and you work with us. For us to slam your blood pressure down to where it says we need to have it, probably isn't going to go well. Maybe you won't even come back and see us because you just feel so miserable. So I think that if you have 40 years of high blood pressure, this will be a work in progress. This is not something that's going to be solved overnight. Because I think that the key is for us to listen to what's going on with the medicines we're giving you, and then work with you to try and get your blood pressure down, through some of these different topics that we're talking about this evening. I like this picture just because it just kind of looks like my son sometimes. Good sleep. So this finally made it into the Simple 7 is now the Essential 8. This is crucial. And I've been talking with people that I see in clinic a lot about this because I think this is the one thing we all have to do. Some people smoke, some people don't. Some people exercise, some people don't. Some people eat well, some people don't. Everyone does this. Everyone sleeps. And it's important for us to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. There's variability. I mean, if you're, for the adult, we're looking at 7 to 9. Certainly if you're younger, kids need a lot more sleep. But it has to be good sleep. A lot of the technology we have access to today, your Apple Watch, your Samsung Fossil, Fitbit, Oura Ring, all these things are actually getting pretty good. And I think they assist a lot in tracking your sleep. And I think this will be the thing on the Medical Monday. Bring this information in. You're going to have, I envy the people who sleep well every single night. More common is that you sleep good most of the time, and every so often you just don't sleep as well. I would encourage you to think a little bit more about what was going on the day before or what you did. If there's a lot of stress, if you don't drink and you have one. I got so many people that come in and they're like, yeah, I just didn't sleep well last night. And I'm like, what was going on yesterday? And they're like, I normally have a beer and I had a couple more beers. But alcohol generally does not bode well for good sleep. Here's your most tired, most sleep-deprived states. And there we are again. Yay, Colorado. So we're doing well with sleep. Unfortunately, the Deep South there is having trouble once again with so many of these things. And again, we can back this up, but we could say maybe it's stress, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's trying to figure out how you're going to make things work. I think that those things can play a big part, which is an excellent segue into the last bit here. But here's your one-page synopsis. The thing I'm telling a lot of people, so many of us, I'm guilty of it as well. You sleep with your cell phone at bedside. Get rid of it. Put it in a different room. Get away from electronic devices. I'm telling more and more people not to watch the news, because things that disrupt or cause elevated stress can really interfere with sleep. I'm a big fan, and if any of my patients are watching, it's like, watch Seinfeld or Friends. Watch some of the old shows, where you can kind of laugh a little bit because there's just so much stress going on right now. So yeah, get rid of the phone. It talks about locking it, block it. Okay. So now we're coming to the part of the talk where this is the homework assignment. And I don't know how this works out, because if you guys are watching this on your computer at home, you'll figure it out. So my life checklist. So if in the beginning of this talk you happen to shrink me down so you can hear me but you can't see me, and you went to heart.org, when you go to that website, you can see all the slides we just presented. It's near the top. It's got the 8 different things. And it's a lot more visible. I mean, again, it's difficult for me to try and get each one of these pages where you can see them. But I think you get the gist of what we're trying to do here. This life checklist, I wasn't as forceful as I'm going to be tonight the last time I did this. I want people to do this. I want you to get on and do this. I want you to sign up. I want you to answer these questions. And here's the part that I'm stressing the most. I want you to be honest with yourself. When you fill these things out, when you say what you eat, when you say what you exercise, be as honest as you can, because I think you're only doing yourself a disservice if you fib a little in there. Now, I'll swing back around on that in a second, but I think if you fill this out the way it's most truthful, I think you're going to get more bang for the buck. Okay? We talked a little bit about this stuff. There's a strong inverse association between the number of cardiovascular health metrics in your score and cardiovascular disease and mortality. So the higher your cardiovascular health score, the lower your mortality. Patients with a high genetic risk have a 50% lower risk for cardiovascular events when they have high scores. This is what's going against the fact that, you're like, my family history is terrible. I can't do anything about it. I'm like, no, not so. I think if you really dial in and you look at the metrics that they've plugged in, so you can say yes or no, fill it out. It's never too late to gain benefit. And I think that's why I'm hopeful that I've got some young people watching this, because I think that if you do this sooner, you gain more benefit long term. It's not to say if you're 93 years old and watching this, you can still have some improvement. You've already won, and I would like to talk to you more about how you got to 93. But I think that the sooner you adopt some of these changes, the better. The sooner you're able to get this number to spit out so you know where you are, the more you can kind of work with it. The better cardiovascular health is associated with a lower risk of cancer, kidney disease, and dementia as well. So it's like, if you really don't care about your heart, we can kind of rope in cancer, kidney disease, and dementia as well. And then finally, people do not inherit cardiovascular health. You have to. This is your work to do. This is behavior. This is environment, and that's why, again, with all these maps showing the South, I want people to understand. If I had everyone from the South watching right now, there are changes you can make. And I get it. I know that there's a lot of things that are going on right now, and I think that the stress can play a big part in choices that are made. The ease with which you can pick up a burger anywhere, doesn't have to be a particular state, versus going home and making a sandwich. There's a heavy weight of psychological, social, and structural determinants on cardiovascular health. That's why I believe I've got this picture. We're talking about social determinants of health. This is like this picture right here. If you forget all the rest of what I talked about, this one right here I think is crucial. And it's kind of an unfortunate thing because at the end of the most recent article on this is what they presented, and I'm like, man, this should be like right in the front, because so much of this is what's going on right now with everyone. When there's a lot of stress, when there's a lot of anxiety, that can push all of these things over into the realm of bad sleep, less exercise, unhealthy eating habits. Your glucose gets out of control. Your cholesterol, falls by the wayside. And I'm starting to sound so Boulder, and I realize it, but if you go into each day with a positive attitude, trying to make the most out of what's going on, I do, and I realize I sound so goofy with some of this stuff, but this has such an important impact on all of the 8 things we just talked about. And I think if you're grumpy pants and you're down and you just don't have friends, there's not a lot of socialization, it's going to be very difficult for you to get a great score. I think if you socialize, if you get out, I talk about getting people out and having dinner. Have people over for dinner. You can't cook, that's fine. Have people over. You don't have to drink. I think that, that's been something that's been fed to us for years and years as well. But I think for people to get back together, for people to bring people over. I went to a dinner a couple nights ago out at one of these farms, the Yaya farm, and there's 100 people sitting at one table. And we all, I met people across from me, beside me, next to me. And I think that kind of stuff is something that needs to be happening more. I just feel that we need to be reaching across and getting people that you don't know that well. And I think that having more social interaction and less social media, I think that's my little nugget for the talk. This last picture here, I think this one's a good picture because we all know about primary prevention, which is nothing's happened and we're trying to get you on the right course with this, that, and the other. Secondary prevention is something's happened, we don't want it to happen again. This graphic, though, shows one of the newer things, which is primordial prevention, which is in utero, what your parents do, what they eat, what they, do they smoke, do they exercise? This is before you're even born. And I think if we can work more with, having, pregnancy is a big deal. And there's a lot of problems with pregnancy in this country right now and access to healthcare. And understanding what things are good to eat, what you need to do. And I think that then leads itself into education for children in a young age. I think that they're doing a fantastic job in Boulder Valley right now with the school districts making a whole lot more healthy food accessible to all the kids. So I think, I guess what I'm going with this is some of this is an individual responsibility. You make choices. Some of this has to do with public health policy. And I think that when you put those two things together, a lot of these things can be implemented. The last bit, and I made it smaller because I think it's more on the doctors and less on the patients, the electronic health records have made our ability to track so many of these things so much easier. So we can see what your weight looks like, what your blood pressure looks like. We can track your labs, your cholesterol. And I think that this, which is what, Boulder's built on. We have a fantastic electronic medical record, and it brings so much of that together for us. And then lastly, the My Life checklist. I'm encouraging you all, when you come in to see anyone, and not just me, you better come in if you're one of my patients, and I want to know your number. Now let's circle back to that for 1 second. The mean cardiovascular health score for adults in the United States is just about 65%. That's, I think it's an F on a test. What I'd like for you to do, though, is I want you to plug the numbers in, and I want you to see who you are. But then I want you to lie. I want you to put in more exercise. I want you to eat more. And I want you to see the effect of what it has on this number with these small changes. And I think there's your motivator. Do you need a doctor to yell and scream at you and say, do this, do that? When you can plug this stuff in on your own, this goes back to the individual responsibility. You can see what more exercise does. You can see what a little bit of weight loss does. You can see what more sleep does. And I think that for you as the patient to be able to do that on your own, it makes the conversation you have with the doctor that much more rich. Again, we were talking about risk calculators. I'm wrapping it up here. I'm a big fan of the ASCVD risk calculator. It's another, there's an app for that. I try and get people, I certainly do it with students, where we can crunch some numbers and find out what your 10-year cardiovascular risk would be. We're shooting for less than 7.5%. Again, this is blood pressure, weight, sex, on meds, off meds, and I think you can fill that out and have that number. So I'm trying to see you as a person, but I also want you to give me some numbers. There's a new risk calculator called Prevent, and there's a whole lot of hot topic or hot discussion right now because the ASCVD risk will include some, and then the Prevent will exclude them. And so I think people are trying to duke it out as to which one's better. To be honest with you, I'm like, do them both. Do the ASCVD risk calculator, do the Prevent risk calculator. But you better come in with I want your score. I want you to see what your score is. I want you to know what you can do, with modification. And I think that, that's the summary. I think you've got 8 things that you can do. I think all these 8 are tied together by psychological stuff. And so, getting out and doing things with people, socializing, learning a new skill. I tell people, I had a 85-year-old woman came in and she's bored. And I'm like, I was like, maybe, you could learn to play an instrument or speak a foreign language. There's so much access to do things where you're doing different things with your brain. So I'm like, do something different, but please, let's try and do more socialization. Let's put the phones down, put the tablets down, turn off the TV, go outside, and just be with people. So that's my talk. Let's see if my parents wrote a question this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schutz. That was very informational, and we do have a few questions that have come in.
All right.
And we want to remind our audience that now is the time to put your question in the chat box below the video, and we'll get to just as many as we can. And these are in no particular order tonight.
All right.
So
let's go.
This person is on 40 mg of statin, eating healthy, started exercising, but their coronary calcium score is 475. Should I just continue doing all of the above or something else? They're 70 years old, they're a woman, they do not smoke or drink.
That's good. So you got a lot of good in there. To be honest with you, so, and I won't be able to ask this question, but I'm asking this so you can answer this question. But, my first question is, did you have a calcium score that was abnormal that led to you starting the cholesterol medicine? Or were you on a cholesterol medicine because your score was low and now it's higher? So, it's a great question. And it's difficult because I think that there's several different ways this can go. Should you just stay on this and keep doing what you're doing? The shortest answer would be yeah. I think continue exercise, continue to make some changes. I think that one of the things that we have to think about the statins is they will get your cholesterol where we at this point in time feel it needs to be as you make modifications. It came up today, I threw someone on cholesterol medicine today and they're like, I just don't want to be on this med for life. And the short answer is you're probably going to be on it for life. The long-winded answer is let's use the medicine to get your cholesterol where we want it to be. And then let's use these calculations. Let's get, some lifestyle changes and do those. And if you do them and you implement them and they stick, your blood pressure's better, you're sleeping better, you're exercising more, then maybe we stop the statin and find out who you are without it. I think it's, I think when people are told something's forever, that just feels bad. It feels bad to me. And I think that some people may disagree with me, but I think at the end of the day, if you do what we're trying to get you to do, the reward would be for us to see who you are with those things that you've done. And so I think that, your question was, it's a good one. I think that the short and sweet is, stay on the medicine, keep exercising, modify some small detail that sticks. I think if you go to bed a meat eater and you wake up the next day and you're like, I'm just eating plants, I'm like, it isn't going to go well. But I think if you change things, for the first month, again, maybe you don't eat as much meat, and then the next month you eat more of this vegetable, and the next month you're doing 10 minutes more of exercise. But it's slow, but it'll stick. I think if you try and do too big a change, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you agree with the assertion that a diet with just 10% fat calories can actually reverse arterial plaque buildup?
Ooh, see, that's tricky. So I hone in on the reversal. The likelihood that we're going to get reversal is low. The likelihood that me put you on statins, we get your cholesterol down. I mean, the fact of the matter is, most of the time when calcium's there, it's there. There's not a whole lot we can do to get it to go away. There's plenty of studies that have been backed by pharma that suggest that if you're on this drug or that drug, that there could be plaque regression. And if that's the case, great. That's awesome. But I think that the better way to think of it is, if you can slow the process that started down, that's kind of what we're going for. So, heavy restriction on a dietary, on a specific dietary exposure like fats is going to cause plaque regression. We can hypothesize that if there is a significant shift in your cholesterol, mainly your LDL is quite low, your triglycerides are low, and your HDL gets high, there definitely would be some benefit to that. But I think that the question you bring up, the comment you bring up it's a good one, because that's always a question that comes out, which is, can we get plaque regression? And the shortest answer is probably not. So I think the safer answer is we're just going to slow it down. If we slow it down and you have progressive coronary atherosclerosis, again, you hit 95 years of age, I'm like, I think you won. So I hope that helps with that.
Okay. Can you please address calcium heart scores?
Yeah, so I used to hate them. And I hated them because I don't think, I knew exactly what to do with them. In the beginning, when we started doing these, we'd get a heart scan, and if it was, some of it was arbitrary, or it felt very arbitrary. If the score was over 500 or 1,000, we're off to the cath lab. You got critical disease. And that went on for a short period of time. And what we found is a lot of people don't have critical disease. So I think that the heart scan is an excellent way. It's very sensitive, but it's not specific. And I think that's what I actually like. It's kind of one and done too. So I love it because that's what gets people in the door. That's what gets people to say, I got my heart scan and my score is 10. What does that mean? What do I do? And I think that's where we can have good conversations about these 8 things, plus or minus on, medication manipulation if you're already doing these 8 things. But I also feel like, once you get it, if your score is anything other than 0, I'm not a big fan of doing it again. And the reason I'm not is it's radiation exposure, and it costs money. Generally it's not paid for, and $100 or $200 is $200. I don't care who you are. So I think if we know what we know, then we use that information to try and attack these, 8 essential things, possibly add some medications to control something that may be out of control while we're trying to figure out why. But I like it. I think it's good. I think it's a good intro study. If you have heart disease, if you got stents, don't do it. There's no point. You're already in the secondary prevention. This is more primary prevention. You got a strong family history. You got some symptoms. You're kind of scared. Part of it would be to get the imaging to see if there's any calcium, and then do a functional study to find out if the symptom you have is in one bin or the other, and that would be heart disease or not.
Thank you. Do naps count towards your sleep requirements?
Oh, man. That's a good question. And I don't know if I have a good answer for that. My first thought would be no, simply because it takes some time to get to deep sleep and REM. And I think that's where you're getting the most bang for the buck. But the other thing that I would say is that there have been some studies that suggest that, a power nap in the middle of the day can actually be quite refreshing. So as far as the cumulative effect of the, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, I'd have to say that, it's probably good for, getting you to feel better. And if you're doing it and you feel better when you do it, part of me is like, well, then keep doing it. But as far as like the deep sleep and the REM, you're probably not touching on that with a nap.
Is there increased cardiovascular risk with regular cannabis use? It helps me sleep.
Yeah. So that depends a little bit on how you get it. If you smoke it, that gets dumped right in with the tobacco. So smoking is bad. So I'm going to go with, maybe you're doing a gummy or something like that. There is some data that suggests that cannabis use can cause problems, cardiovascular issues. And I think, the more that it has been legalized, the more that it's used, the more you're going to see studies that will look into that. The problem had been, it's illegal. And so we're not doing, there weren't any high volume studies that were being done. And so I think that part of me would feel that certainly, again, it's easy if it's smoking. I'd say no, that's not acceptable. But if you're doing like a gummy or something like that, at the end of the day, to be honest with you, I think more studies need to be done. We need more information. So I'm kind of uncomfortable saying, oh no, you get better sleep with it. That it does make sense. But I think that there's a lot more that needs to be unpacked from cannabis in general. So yeah, that's a tough one.
Okay. What are the names of the assessment tests and how to find them again, please?
It's heart.org, www.heart.org. And it should be, if you go to that website, right at the top of it, you'll see the Essential 8. The graphic that we had with the 8 little pie pieces around. And then right under that, you can click on any of those, and that will open up all of the one-page summaries that I had. And again, I like that so much more because on the Eat Healthy, you can click on a link and it'll scuttle you over to some recipes. The design of the website is supposed to be somewhat interactive. And then if you scroll down, it really is out of order because it has the Essential 8, and then under that, it has, for kids, that should be on top. But that's neither here nor there. And then right below the kids, it has the health score and how to calculate it. You make a username and password, sign in, write it down. You can make up a name, Mickey Mouse, but put a viable web address in there, or an email address rather, but fill it out. And again, be truthful, fill it out who you really are. And then I think that the encouragement, so don't get down if it comes back and it's like 50 or lower. But what I'd like for you to do is modify it. And if you smoke and you knock that off, look at what it does. And that's just one variable. And I think if you eat this and not that, look at what it does. And I think that, bring that stuff in, bring it to your primary. And then if you know something about that number and they don't, then, kudos to you. But I think it's a wonderful, reproducible metric that you can use to find out where are you with the information that we have today.
Do you recommend seniors getting COVID shots and flu shots?
Yes. Next question. No, the short would be, I do because I think that if you can have, so this is a control thing. If you have exposure to either one of those things, and be it synthetic, I think that, and what I mean by that is if you go so the other thing is I'm not a huge fan of getting both shots at once. I think that that's a lot of strain on the system. Sure, people do it. There's commercials, everyone, and some of it has to do with just getting it done. Like if you don't go to the doctor and you're only going to go once, well, then get both shots. Otherwise, I think I'd separate it out. But I think that as the earth tips back and the days are darker and there's less vitamin D or whatever is causing these things. Now we're inside, the houses are closed up, it's cold. I think for you to have control over exposure to these things where the likelihood that these things, in the form of a vaccine are going to kill you is low. I think that if you get the wild type, whatever variant of COVID or flu that's floating around, I skipped the flu shot many years ago, and I swear to God, I'll never skip it again. It's just terrible. Because I think it's also the most inopportune times. You're getting ready to take a trip and you get the flu or the COVID, or you come back and then give it to everyone. But I think I think that those two things are good. I think also if you're around a lot of kids, your grandparents, RSV, get the RSV as well. But I think it's easy access. So it's good.
So we may not be able to answer all questions tonight because of time constraints. For audience members who want to ask their question about Life's Essential 8, please email those to pr@bch.org. We'll get one more in here quickly. Is taking a good quality ginseng concentrate in a tea beneficial?
That's the last question. That's the one I have to end on. Supplements are interesting. So the evil me is that most supplements don't do anything except make your pee expensive. I said it. Now, with that being said, I think that, yes, I did say that, just in case people are like looking at each other and like, did he really say that? I think that if there's a supplement that you take, and I'll be honest with you, if you feel better when you take the stuff, within reason, you know where I'm going with that, then take it. I think that there are some supplements we have to be careful with. I think this is a good discussion to have with your primary or with us. Do I think that one in particular? Sure, there's some data that suggests that, this ginseng tea, white tea, black tea, they're good. Now, why it is, I don't know. And more is not better. So I think, that's one of the things we have to be very careful of. Like, you have one cup of tea and you're like, I feel good, so now I'm going to have 6. I'm like, I don't know about that. So I think that supplements we have to be careful with. But again, if you have a cup of tea and it makes you feel better, you sleep better, heck yeah. I think that's fine. You're the individual who, if it doesn't work for your mom and dad and it works great for you, then keep that one to yourself. It works great. So it's a good topic, but it's a lengthy answer, and again, I think to each his own. But I think, yeah, if it makes you feel better, within reason, and again, you guys, all know what I'm talking about, and it's probably, if it helps with that stuff, but just be mindful. I think the last bit I'll say is if you're spending like $100 a month on a supplement, I think twice about that. I think the better supplement would be to go out and exercise. I think the better supplement would be to eat the things that have the supplement you're trying to get. Fish oil, go get fish. If you hate fish, then fish oil is your friend. But I think if you're thinking fish oil, then I think it's better to just simply eat fish. Almonds are great, pistachios are great. They're just chock full of stuff. And I think it's healthy. So, yeah. Hopefully that's a good answer.
Thank you so much for your time and your information tonight, Dr. Schutz. We want to tell that our audience that we have come to the end of our time, and a recording of tonight's lecture will be available at bch.org/livestream.